Good afternoon. We will begin with the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Oh, until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, which is devoid of suffering. And may they always dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or aversion for those near or far. Now think to your, in the Dharma expanse, Palasavakanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that the Dharma becomes the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. So now think to yourselves that we need to bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings, to the state beyond suffering, the state of Buddhahood, and that in order to do so, we need to achieve Buddhahood ourselves. So for that reason, we are listening to and contemplating the true Dharma. And the Dharma, so please listen with this motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, according to the commentary by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje, entitled Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters of the verses, the 8 areas, we are discussing the 4th area, teachings on karma. Teachings on karma have a brief description of how everything arises from karma. From karma, various worlds are born. It's the external worlds and the sentient beings within them. Then there's a longer section, the bulk of the chapter is the passage on understanding karma, which has the 3 parts, the identifying karma, volitional karma of mind, and intended karma of body and speech. And then the next section is the general presentation of karma according to the Great Exposition tradition, and then the explanation of karma according to the sutras. The meaning of karma as explained in the sutras has a general presentation again, and then specific explanations. And in the general teaching, general explanation or general teachings, there are 4 topics, classifying in terms of cause and result, teaching the many enumerations of karma, which karma has how many results, and other presentations of karma. So here, we have finished the first, which was talking about karma in terms of virtue, non-virtue, neutral, merit, non-merit, unmoving, and so forth. And then we are in the section talking about, now we're in the section talking about the many enumerations of karma. So these are enumerations of karma, are not exhaustive lists that combine all of them, but they are different ways of that karma is presented. And then among the enumerations of karma, there's a section on classifying them in terms of function and then explaining karmic paths in particular. And so we are in the explanation of explaining karmic paths in particular, and so that has an overview and an explanation, and the explanation has the 4 topics, classifications of perceptible and imperceptible. And the second is the 3 virtuous and non-virtuous roots. That is the section we finished with yesterday. The third section is teaching the 3 completing factors, and the fourth is teaching the individual karmas. The individual actions is another way to say it. So yesterday when we talked about the which actions come out of which roots, we spoke about how the unvirtuous actions come from the 3 roots of greed, hatred, and delusion. How the virtuous actions come out of non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So here, when we're talking about these roots, we're talking about it's similar, although the text does not specifically say this, so I'm hesitant to say that it actually is this, but it is similar to the presentation on the 2 different types of causes that we spoke about. Or the 2 different types of motivation. There is the causal motivation and then the contemporaneous motivation, how these 2 can be different. And so, and this is in a sense similar. When you are looking at an unvirtuous action, then you can have any of the 3 unvirtuous roots as the root of that action. But when you're completing it, not all actions necessarily can have all 3 roots. Some of them can only have 1 root. With the virtuous factors, it's a little bit different, and this might be whether it's not framed in terms of the causal and contemporaneous motivations. With the virtuous factors, because all 3 of those factors always go together, then there is no need to really discuss the difference. Because if they're motivated by the virtuous mental factors, and so if that's the root, and then at the time of completion, which if it's going to be? It's going to be all 3, because they all 3 always come together, right? But it's different for the 3 unvirtuous roots. In particular, we have to remember that of the 3 roots, we've got delusion, hatred, and greed. Now, delusion can be concurrent with the other 2, but greed and hatred cannot be concurrent toward the same object. In other words, you cannot have greed and hatred toward the same object in a single moment. A single cognition is either going to have greed or it's going to have hatred. It's not going to have both. Now, because we're fickle, sentient beings, we sometimes might alternate in between the 2 so quickly that we think that they're happening at the same time. Actually, at any given moment, it's like one moment you're really annoyed at someone, you're feeling aversion. And the next moment you remember you love them and you're feeling love. And then you remember the aversion. Well, that's going back and forth. Sometimes it goes back and forth quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, right? So basically, greed and hatred cannot operate at the same time toward the same object. And the other thing that I mentioned yesterday, but we also have to reiterate today because it's important for understanding what we're going to talk about. Greed and hatred cover very wide ranges in English. And so this is a problem that it's almost impossible as a translator. I mean, do you say attachment? Some people do that. Well, attachment is kind of, it doesn't sound so bad. Whereas the Tibetan and the Sanskrit words definitely do sound pretty bad. Chinese words. I had a Chinese friend once say to me, "Why do you English people always say attachment? It just doesn't. It sounds like nothing. It doesn't sound bad at all. Whereas the Chinese word, it sounds like it's really horrible." Right. So that's like, and I think that the Tibetan and the Sanskrit words also have a pretty strong sense. But at any rate, when we're talking about greed, we're talking about everything from minor attachment out to greed, and also including lust, not separating out sexual and other types of desires. Sometimes people translate this as passions, which is kind of a very, 18th century sort of usage of the word. We use passions differently in the 21st century generally. So anyways, I chose greed. Then also when we have hatred, when you have hatred, you can have anything from just a minor feeling of aversion out to absolute intense hatred. So it's all that whole gamut. But also one other reason why I chose the stronger words is that if you look in yourself when you are feeling a little bit of attachment or a little bit of aversion, and you look at the nature of what you are feeling, you might find it surprising how strong it is. It's really actually quite strong. If you look right at the essence of it, it's actually very strong. Even if on the surface level it doesn't seem so, when you look at it, there's a lot of energy, even in a minor attachment or a minor bit of hatred or a minor bit of aversion. So you have to take a look at that, but don't take my word for it. Look for yourselves. And if you find something different, excellent, but look. No, I'm serious. If my experience is different than your experience, that's good, because it means that you are actually looking at your experience, right? If you just take my word for it and say, oh, because Khenpo David says so, it doesn't matter. It's not going to help you at all. You have to look for yourselves. All of this is stuff where you have to look for yourselves. Okay, so we are in the section on teaching the three completing factors. It says the three topics: the actual, what their bases are, and delineating what is or is not the actual basis. In other words, what's the actual action or not. So the actual has 4 points. So now when we're talking about the completing factors, what we are talking about is essentially which of the three unvirtuous roots is present in your mind when you are committing any of the 10, when you're completing the action of any of the 10. So we spoke about the three aspects of the preparation, the actual basis, and the aftermath. We mean which is present in your mind at the moment you are completing the actual basis. Okay? So the three completed by hatred. Hatred brings killing and harsh words and malice to completion. So hatred brings killing. So we've got three here. We've got taking life. We've got harsh words and malice. And so at any time that you are taking life, or speaking harsh words, or if you're feeling malice, you have that is accompanied by hatred. So hatred brings killing and harsh words and malice to completion, because killing eradicates life. Or I've been looking at this word again this morning, not necessarily eradicating. Killing deprives of life, deprives another being of life. Parityajate in Sanskrit. And a harsh mind is manifest in the other two. When you're speaking harsh words or insults, then you've got a harsh mind, and that's got hatred as its basis, as does malice. So those three are completed by hatred. In other words, you have that hatred present when you do them. Then there are three that are completed by desire. So sometimes in Tibetan they say dorje, which would be said desire, which I would translate as desire, and sometimes they say chakpa, which is either greed or lust. And if I'm talking about it in general terms, then I'll use the word greed. I'd use the word lust generally only in sexual contexts, but it's really the same word. So greed brings coveting, adultery, and also stealing to completion. So greed also is present when you're completing the three acts of covetousness, sexual misconduct or adultery here, and stealing or taking that which is not given. So when you're doing any of these three actions, there's greed, there's desire for something, right, when you're doing it. And that's present at the moment. So at the beginning, you might have any sort of motivation to do it, but when you're actually committing it, then at that time, that greed or lust is present. Then there is one that is completed by delusion, wrong view completed by delusion. So wrong view is completed, brought to its completion by delusion because it is confused about Dharma. So the wrong view, essentially with wrong view, what we primarily means are the extremist views and the views of denial of past and future lives and the results of arhats and so forth. Those are the wrong views that we are primarily concerned about, the denial of karmic cause and effect. And that comes out of delusion, and that delusion can be learned, it can be taught, or it can just be that you were never taught the right view. But at any rate, that it's a mistaken view of this, and that leads to a wrong view. For example, if you are always taught that animals are dumb brutes that have no soul, and that it's okay to kill them and eat them or use them in science experiments or do whatever, then you're going to have little thought about that. And that comes out of what? It comes out of delusion. It's not like scientists are particularly enjoy torturing animals. It's not that. It's just that they don't consider them to be sentient beings. And this is actually still a very strong current in Western thought. And so I sometimes do a little bit of reading of philosophical articles and stuff, and there's a large current of thought that says that animals aren't sentient in the same way that humans are. Then there are other people, of course, there's a lot of animal rights and so forth. I'm really digressing, aren't I? There are animal rights people who would view it the other way. But in any case, that sort of wrong view that says, okay, it's all right to go and kill frogs, animals, pigs for consumption, and so forth. That's also a wrong view. Then we have the three completed by all three. The rest by three, it is proposed. The rest, that is the three that remain, lying, divisive speech, and idle chatter, are brought to completion by any one of the three, that is greed, hatred, or delusion, it is proposed. So that means when you're telling a lie, at the moment you're telling the lie, you can have any of those three afflictions. Same with divisive speech. You might be saying divisive speech because you might be saying divisive words because you want to get something from someone, or you might want to get back. You might have a resentment, which is hatred, right? Or you might just be deluded and think that it's going to be amusing. I guess that's kind of desire. You want to be amused. You might have some delusion that makes you think that you should engage in divisive speech or lying and so forth. And so for that reason, these three can be completed by any of the three roots of non-virtue. So here we've had 4 different categories of actions, right? We've got the 3 that are completed by hatred, that is killing, harsh words, and malice. We've got the 3 completed by desire, which is covetousness, sexual misconduct, and taking that which is not given. Then we've got the 1 completed by delusion is wrong view, and the 3, lying, divisive speech, and idle chatter, that are completed by all 3. So we've got these 4 different categories, right? So what are their bases? In other words, what are the supports or the objects that they are done in relation to? That's what we're talking about. When you are killing, what do you kill? When you are lying, what is the basis for that? When you are engaging in stealing or taking that which is not given, or sexual misconduct, what is the basis of that? What is the object? So here when we talk about bases, this is a similar word as basis, of the actual basis of conduct, and this is one of the strange things about, we've got these, just the terminology, but at any rate, what we mean are the supports. So here the Tibetan word is shi, the Sanskrit adhisthana. The basis or object for taking life is sentient beings. So here, Wangchuk Dorje is being very short. He's saying taking life, but it also means harsh words and malice. So when you're going to kill, you can only kill something that's animate, right? If it's not animate, you can't kill it. Which is very good, because in Tibetan we always say, kill the lights, kill the lights. And otherwise, every time we turned off the lights, we'd be killing the lights and getting a getting a misdeed for doing that. But we don't, because lights are inanimate, right? So you can only kill animate sentient beings. Harsh words, that's an interesting one, because we use harsh words at things like our computers all the time. But I guess that doesn't actually become the real karmic basis. It doesn't become the actual thing. Because generally, when you're talking, it means the harsh words for sentient beings. We use it quite often in political speech. We have to be very careful about that. Malice. Malice is malice is directed at a sentient being. So those three. The basis for lying with someone else's spouse and so forth is enjoyment. So this would be lying with someone else's spouse or committing sexual misconduct. Spouse here is kind of a broad term. It also would include children and so forth. Coveting is also in terms of enjoyments, and stealing is also in terms of enjoyments. And so here, this terrible, as a translator, we have this terrible problem dealing with the word longchut in Tibetan, longchut, or what is it in Sanskrit? I've forgotten. The Sanskrit's blanking my mind. Something, whatever it is in Sanskrit, it doesn't really matter. What this word means that we translate as enjoyments, because we don't have anything better to use, are the things or people that you use and enjoy and that you consider your own. So when we say that, like, this is easy to see with stealing, with taking that which is not given. You're taking something that someone else considers their own. If it's not considered anyone's, then it's not stealing. If it's completely unowned, then there's not stealing. For example, in the northern continent of Unpleasant Sound, no one has any concept of ownership, so there's no stealing. Because, everything's unowned. So that's easy to see. And then coveting is similar, because you see, well, you're coveting someone else's things. Well, you can be biblical and covet thy neighbor's wife, or thy neighbor's husband, or thy neighbor's partner, whichever way we phrase it nowadays. It doesn't really make much difference. And also when you're talking about committing sexual misconduct, then it's framed in terms of being someone who is considered someone else's. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the other person owns them. Now, we do have, of course, we have to admit that this text was written in ancient India, where they had very different ideas. And in particular, it was primarily written for monks. There are a bunch of spots in this passage where it's, especially in the auto commentary, where it's pretty clear that Vasubandhu was speaking about monks. But it does also apply in other contexts. The basic thing is that when you are committing sexual misconduct with someone else's partner, then at that point, who is it harming? It might not harm that other person's partner. That other person's partner might well enjoy it. But who it's harming is that other person, in a sense, because they consider that partner to be their partner, right? So it's like we have these attachment to our partners. And so again, in the northern land of Unpleasant Sound, where no one has any conception of there being any partners, there's no sexual misconduct, because there's no idea of, this is my partner, right? So that would go for adultery, and then we'll get to the rest of that. I better not go too far into sexual misconduct today. We'll come up to that tomorrow, I think, unless I run out of things to say today. Right? So when you're saying enjoyments, when we're talking about people as enjoyments, what we mean here is that people consider their partners or their children their own to some and are offended when other people engage in sexual misconduct. That's why sexual misconduct is such a problem. You know, if everyone is consenting, then you're just acting out of lust, frankly. But it's not going to necessarily create as many problems, or at least you think it's not. I better stop while I'm ahead. And then we've got the other ones on this list. Oh, what is it? Okay, the basis for wrong view is feeling in the other four aggregates of name and the aggregate of form. That is, the basis for wrong view is name and form. In other words, it's the five aggregates. It's misunderstanding the five aggregates. Either thinking that there is a permanent eternal self, or thinking that that it's nihilist and that it's going to cease, or something like that. It's an extremist view, or denial of the continuum into the future lives, and so forth. So it's misunderstanding the nature of feeling and the other four aggregates of name, and the aggregate of form. So in other words, this is again that term, name and form. So when you see name and form, you think the five aggregates. And the basis for the other four of lying and so forth is a collection of words, because speech engages words. So when you're speaking, what are you saying? You're using words. And that's why we would say that this would be engaging the words. That's the basis for the action. What you're actually saying is you're pronouncing words. Now, then other people understand or don't understand, but that's another topic that we'll come to tomorrow. Lying is actually a very difficult topic. Okay, so that is talking about the factors that bring them to what the actual completing factors are and what their bases are. And then we have to delineate what is or is not the actual basis. In other words, when is it actually completing the karmic path? That's the question. And so then there are questions about if you do actions to, what do we have first? You know, what happens if you die before an action is completed, and so forth, or when you do an action in a group, do you all get it, all gain the result together, or does just the person who actually does the act get it? So these are the questions that come up in these next two passages. So in terms of delineating the actual basis, there are 2 points. And the first is those which seem to be but are not. So it may seem that something should be the actual basis, but in fact it is not. So this would be here, when killers die before or else together, there's no actual. They've been born in another body. So what this means is that when you have, let's say you have just a hypothetical situation, and there are different varieties of it. The hypothetical situation, you've got two people who are fighting each other. They each mortally wound the other. They're in a duel. So what is it? Anyways, the two people in a duel. They each shoot each other. One dies before the other. Right. So the one who dies later, it's pretty clear he killed the other guy. That guy's dead while he's still alive, and then he dies a few minutes later. The guy who killed, but the guy who died first, let's give them two names of people who died in duels. We'll have Pushkin and Hamilton. Hamilton, right? So Alexander, they didn't fight each other, but they both died in duels. So Pushkin shoots Hamilton, Hamilton shoots Pushkin, and Pushkin dies first, right? So Hamilton definitely killed Pushkin, but Pushkin actually, because he died first, he engaged in the preparations, but he's dead before Hamilton's done. So he doesn't get the actual basis of killing him. And the reason for that is that he's killed him in the body when he's named Pushkin, and yet he is, at the time that Hamilton dies, then Pushkin has been reborn somewhere else, and probably not very good, especially if you read about Pushkin's life. He probably did a lot of stuff. Anyway, so he was born, let's say he was born as He was born somewhere else. So Pushkin is no longer there. So the time that Hamilton dies, which is when the actual basis is completed, there's no Pushkin to have killed him. So at that point, Pushkin would not have the actual basis, but he would have the problems of he would have the harm from the preparation from killing. So if a killer and his victim should die together, or this is like if Pushkin and Hamilton die at the same time, okay? So if they die together at the same time, or if Pushkin dies before Hamilton, or the killer should die first, is there an actual basis of karma or not? In other words, is there a completion of the karmic act, the actual karmic act? When killers die before or else together with their victims, there is no actual karmic path. So it's not the actual basis. So when Pushkin, they get in the duel and Pushkin has mortally wounded Hamilton, but Pushkin dies first. So Pushkin does not have the actual basis of the actual karmic path. Because at the time that the taking of life is completed, they, the killer, have been reborn in another body than the one in which they performed the preparations. So they've gone on to the next life already. Therefore, because it's a physical act and the physical basis for the action has ceased, then that action is not completed. And so this would probably go along for most of the other actions that we are doing. Here, this also would describe suicide, because when you've completed the act of suicide, then you're reborn in another body. So it's not an actual basis of killing. Even though it's actually, particularly in tantric terms, it's considered one of the worst of the actions that you can do. So it's considered bad, but it doesn't actually become that karmic path according to the Abhidharma. So that is with killing. But we can also think of that with stealing. If you order someone else to steal something and they go and steal it, but you die before it's been stolen, then you don't get the actual karmic path. So that is that's something that looks like it should be the karmic path, but is not. And then we've got the instance where it looks like it probably isn't the karmic path, but actually ends up being the karmic path. And this is a very interesting topic. Those that do not seem to be, but are the karmic path. In wars and so forth, all of them have the same goals, will all possess the karma like the perpetrator. So, this basically means when you're acting as a group, such as in a war, or when you are conducting, if you're bandits conducting a raid, knowing that you're going to kill people as you steal, or if you are seizing land and knowing that you're going to kill as you seize land, or if you are fishing in a fishing boat altogether, or if you are working in a slaughterhouse or something. In the modern day, it just gets, it's really quite depressing to think about. But let's take the simple example. You've got the pre-modern version of war. You've got two bands of 20 people. Pre-modern, they have swords and so forth. They get in a battle and one person is killed. Then the other people then all flee. So there's the victorious side. They've killed, the one person has killed another person. And so we'd say, let's call that other person, since I'm using all these funny classical and ancient names, let's call that person who killed Achilles. So Achilles killed Paris, right? Or did he kill Hector? No, it was Hector who killed Achilles. Anyways, Achilles killed Paris. So Paris is dead. Achilles has killed, and all of Achilles' what do we call them? Mates. That's a bad word. Maybe it's a good word. All of his friends on that side, they say Achilles killed Paris. So who gets the karmic path? it was Achilles who struck the blow that killed Paris. But the actual karma goes to all of them. And the reason that it goes to all of them is that they're all participating with the same goal. They all have the same idea. We're going to go into battle and kill as many of the enemy as we can until we have won the battle. So all possess the karma, just like the one who actually struck the blow. So here it says, when many people gather and agree to make war and so forth, if one person actually deprives another sentient being of life, do the others also have the misdeed of taking life or not, you ask? So when you're doing things in groups, in wars, hunts, and so forth, all of those sentient beings have the preparations for the same goal and so forth. So all those who are not actually killers possess the actual karmic path of taking life, just as the perpetrator who did the actual killing. So in other words, everyone has the actual basis of taking life. Now, this is one reason why acting in groups is so strong. So this is where, what do we say? In our modern society, it gets really quite frightening because we think about at the time of Vasubandhu, a group of fishermen could go out and cast a net and cast maybe a few dozen or a few hundred fish if they were lucky. They'd be happy about it. So those people would all get the karma of killing, a few hundred fish. And so now we have these huge trawlers that float through the ocean, and you've got people on them who are piloting the ship and people who are actually running the winches or whatever you do to trawl, and they're all hauling up, thousands and thousands of animals, killing thousands and thousands of animals and not keeping most of what they kill, or much of what they kill. I don't know if it's most or much, but they throw a lot overboard that they can't sell commercially. The amount of bad karma that happens in those situations. Or we can think about slaughterhouses. So that's like where you've got, a few hundred people, 1,000 people go to work a day. And I think I was reading them because of the coronavirus epidemic, they're talking about these slaughterhouses where factories that would process 150,000 hogs in a day. Well, we know what processing a hog means. They're killing. So you've got 3,000 people who are participating in that, who are all getting that bad karma of killing all of those hogs. When we look at warfare, and particularly some of the large battles, of the large wars of the 20th century, you would have to hope that you'd be the first one killed in a battle, because otherwise it would just be, horrible. So, it's really strong. And then the question of how far does it go? Because in our modern society, the way we organize things, the tentacles go out very far. So it may be that there is one unit, especially these days, there's one unit of maybe 100 soldiers who are actually fighting, but there are many more who are involved in the process of making it possible. So how far back does it go? And this is a really interesting question. And I don't have an answer for it, but I think it goes back pretty far. So, that's looking at it on, in terms, it's pretty depressing. And so it's this, this is using killing as an example, and so we can use it with any of the misdeeds except for sexual misconduct. As we discussed yesterday, that's one that you have to commit yourself. But then the other issue, well, what about people who are conscripted, who have no choice? They're pressed into, like people who were drafted into, in the United States, a lot of people were drafted into the Vietnam War and they didn't have choice. They had to go to war. So do they get the action? They have the karma as well. And so that's what is dealt with next. Those who are conscripted against their will possess it if they later develop a mind intent upon the same goal. That is, later, after they are conscripted. But if they do not wish to harm, even at the cost of their own life, they do not possess it. So it's like if you're conscripted, and they say, you go out and fight or we're going to kill you, it's probably, if you access to it, if you say, okay, I'll go, and then you participate in the battle, then you are also, even if you do not actually kill anyone, then you still have the actual basis. So in general, when we do actions together, they become much stronger. There's just everyone participating together and doing an action. So when we're talking about killing, then it's of course a negative. When we're talking about stealing, then it's negative. But we can also look at it on the good side. I mean, frankly, all of these teachings, even though we're talking about them in terms of bad things, so you've also got the fact that when we have, for example, 7 weeks ago or so, we had the prayers led by the Ninth Karmapa for the pandemic to subside. And during the prayers for the pandemic to subside, there were about 100,000 people around the globe all praying together for the pandemic to subside. And so they all had the same intent. We were going to pray with the Karmapa for the pandemic to subside. They all participated in it at the same time. And so therefore, each of them got each other's karma, the positive karma. So, and it's like one of the great reasons for doing pujas and so forth in groups. It's like you can magnify your merit for doing the puja just by being if you're doing it with 5 people, 5 times the merit. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that if you're doing like the preliminary practices together and you all do your prostrations together, you don't have to do less prostrations. It doesn't work that way. But you get the merit of more doing it, if you all do it together. Because you're all working towards the same goal, and so you all completing the actual basis of the merit together, and therefore you gain the merit altogether. So, as with many things, even though here the example is given in terms of misdeed, we can also look at it in terms of merit. So, that's discussing what is it? Where have we got back to? So in terms of the explanation of the different, where did I go? Where did that harm? Oh yeah, the explanation of karmic paths. So now we've come to the part where we're teaching the individual karmas. So in particular, we're talking about the 10 non-virtues and so forth. So the teaching the individual karmas has 4 topics: the characteristics of each karma, how many can simultaneously engage volition, which wanderers have how many karmic paths, and teaching the results of the karmic paths. So here we have 4 different topics, and of them we first talk about the karma, the characteristics of each karma. So in other words, what is taking life? What is taking that which is not given? What is sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and so forth? So the characteristics of each karma has 2 topics. The first is identifying each one, so going through each individually, and then second, explaining wrong view in particular. So identifying each one has 4 points. There's karma of the body, karma of speech, karma of mind, and the distinction between karma and karmic paths. Okay, so we're going to start out by talking about karma of the body. This has 3 points because there are 3 non-virtues of body, right? So the first of the non-virtues of body is taking life. To take life is to kill another intentionally, unerringly. So here, this is talking about 3 things that have to happen for it to actually be killing. First of all, you actually have to kill. The other being has to die. That's the first thing. The second is that it has to be intentional. And the third is that it has to be unerring or unmistaken. And so we'll go through each of these in order. What is the nature of taking life in the other karmic paths, you ask? To take life is to kill another being, someone other than oneself. So any sentient being. So this includes humans and animals that we can see. It would also include non-humans, spirits and gods and hungry ghosts and so forth. So any sort of killing that we would engage in. But of course, for us in the human realm, it's mostly going to be humans and animals. What do we say? It includes, when we're talking about humans, it also includes abortion. So this is kind of a political issue in the United States and many other countries, but especially in the United States. Here it's not a political issue. It's a question of it being being human or having become human. So as we spoke about, at the time that the mother's blood, the father's sperm, and the father's semen and the consciousness from the previous existence come together in the womb, then that's become human, even if it's not recognizably human yet. Then at some point in the womb, it's actually recognized human. And everyone would agree it's human, but we're saying that basically from the moment of conception onwards for humans. So abortion is considered a karmic path of taking life. That's the first thing. So someone other than oneself. If it's killing yourself, then it doesn't become the karmic path because you die before the path is completed, or when it's completed. And the second part is that it has to be intentionally thinking, I will kill him. So basically what this means, if you are driving your car down the road and all of a sudden a 5-year-old kid jumps in front of your car and you can't stop, you hit and kill that kid, that is not the karmic path of taking life, because you haven't done it intentionally, right? Now, if you are driving your car down the road and the 5-year-old kid jumps in front of your car and you say, annoying kid, and step on the gas, then you have, right? There's a difference. One, there's an intention, I'm going to do it. The other, there's not. So there has to be this intention, I'm going to kill this other sentient being. So this means that accidentally doesn't count as the karmic path of killing. So when you are walking along, and actually there's a long debate in the auto commentary between the Jains and the Buddhists here. The Jains are saying, well, if you accidentally kill other sentient beings, for example, if you're walking and you step on sentient beings and you kill them, then that also is non-dharma, that also is a misdeed. And the response in the Buddhist part is that if there is no intention to kill, and the example that the Jains give is that it's like if you accidentally put your hand in a flame, you're still going to get burnt. So if you still accidentally kill, you're still going to get burnt by the misdeed of killing, they say. And the response to this is that it's not like that. Because when you're accidentally killing, so one example is if you have some sponsors who give some monks, whether they're Buddhist monks or Jain monks, doesn't specify in this, but you have a sponsor who gives a meal. Or let's say that you're having a dinner party. Let's just use a more contemporary example. You have a dinner party and you serve salmon mousse. So when you have the salmon mousse and the salmon mousse ends up being poisoned with botulism and everyone dies, you haven't intended to kill them. It just happened that you had salmon mousse, right? So that doesn't count as actually killing. Or if you are walking along and you're not intending to kill, because there's no intention, it is not the karmic path of killing. Now, yes, the other sentient beings are killed, and we could be more careful, and we should try to be more careful, but we should try to be more careful out of compassion. Not because we're worried about me, my killing and so forth. So compassion is, of course, we don't want to kill other sentient beings. So you should be careful when you're walking along and look where you put your feet and make sure that you don't step on bugs. And this is something when you go to Nepal and you live in a monastery and you see that all the monks are very careful. Look, there are ants there. Don't step there. There are ants. They'll even put rocks around the places where the ants are crossing the path so that people don't step on them, right? So, but that's not out of wanting to avoid killing them for oneself. That's wanting to avoid killing them because it's going to be suffering for the ants that you step on, right? So it's still good to avoid that action. So or if a doctor gives a treatment to a patient and it just happens that patient is the 1 in 100 that it's harmful for and that patient dies, in America, that would be a malpractice suit, I suppose, but it's not the actual basis of killing. Maybe in Canada, I think in Canada it's a little different with malpractice, but I'm not going to go there. So it has to be intentional. You have to have this thought, I'm going to do it intentionally. And then the second thing it has to be unmistaken. It is unerringly killing the one whom the killer intended to kill. So, if you know that Devadatta and Yagyadatta are both sleeping in the same room, and it's dark and it's the night, and you want to go in and kill Devadatta, you go in and you see 2 bunks, each of which has a lump covered with a blanket, and you think, this one must be Devadatta, and you stab him and kill him, then run away. In the morning, everyone is completely upset because Yagyadatta got murdered last night. Devadatta did not get killed. Instead, you killed Yagyadatta. So this is mistaken. So it seems kind of strange, but actually that is not considered because you've made the mistake, right? You intended to kill someone else, right? Or if you are, since I'm American, so if you're packing your pistol in self-defense and you fire a shot in self-defense, and instead of wounding the person you're trying to defend, killing the person you're trying to defend yourself, you kill a 5-year-old child by the side of the road, that would not be the actual practice, actual basis. So this is not saying that it's a good thing to do. It's just saying that it doesn't complete the actual karmic path as explained by the Buddhas, and I'm not exactly certain. Someone's dead and you intentionally killed. On the other hand, if you are not sure who or what it is, but you know you want to kill it, and you do, not knowing exactly who or what it is, then it is still intentionally killing, because like there is a lump under the carpet and you think it's a rat, and so you go and you stab it with an ice pick. Doesn't matter if you ended up killing a rat or if you ended up killing a cat or whatever else it was that was under the carpet. You intended to kill that thing that was under the carpet and you killed it, right? So you don't necessarily have to be able to identify the object, but you have to say this is that object in terms of knowing exactly what it is. You don't have to be able to say it's this type of person, it's this type of animal. You have to have the thought, I'm going to kill that being, whatever it is, and then if you kill it, then that's the actual basis of killing. Okay? So there is room for killing things that you just don't really know what you're killing. Or like when you are, whatever, I better not go there. Thus it has 3 aspects, otherwise it merely possesses the harm of the preparation. And it's not like the harm of the preparation is all that, it's still pretty heavy karma. So now here's another question that comes up, because we say that Well, all beings are impermanent, and we just spoke a few days ago, about how everything ceases upon arising. And so, what does it mean to kill? Because they're going to die anyways. It's like what's killing if there's nothing being killed? Who's being killed? What is being killed? And so, basically, what we're talking about with killing, it means it's stopping the life force of a sentient beings, which means preventing it from continuing. As it says here, life is a non-concurrent formation or the distinctive wind that occurs based on the support of the body and mind. So when we identify what is life, if we read in chapter 2, it talks about the faculty of life force. That faculty of life force it's a non-concurrent formation, but it's also a composite, so it arises and perishes in every moment. And as long as it keeps going in a continuum, in a single likeness, that is within a certain being, then that being stays alive. But when that life force is stopped, for example, if you ring a bell, that bell would continue to ring, but if you damp it then with your hand, that sound stops. You prevent the sequence of causes and effect that would continue that ringing sound. Similarly, if you prevent the sequence of cause and effect that would cause that non-concurrent formation to continue, then you have killed. So that's what we mean by killing. And then, life force can also become described as a wind, or prana. The Sanskrit word is prana here, which we know from our yoga classes. So prana is, it's a particular prana that's based on both the mind and the body. It's not one or not the other, it's based on both of them. And if you engage in an action that prevents that prana from re-arising, similarly, like stopping the ringing bell, if you prevent, then you have taken life. And the question of whose life you have taken, well, this basically means what we assume is a sentient being on relative terms. Even though there's no soul, it's still considered taking life. Okay, that is taking life. So let's go through taking that which is not given. To steal is to make another's wealth one's own by force or thievery. So you have to take someone else's things, either by force, by beating them up and taking it, or by stealth. So to steal or to take what is not given is to make another's wealth one's own. So it's when you have this idea that you're taking it and it's yours, even if you're only thinking of it for a short time. Basically, when you move it from if it's a physical thing, if you move it from the spot where it is with the idea that it's now yours, you have stolen it, even if you only move it a quarter inch. Either through by force, through actually robbing, that is, you go and you mug someone, or by thievery, which means, sneaking in, doing burglary, or picking pockets, or committing white-collar crime. So thievery here is meaning taking without being detected. Here it must also be intentional and unerring. In other words, if you accidentally pick up that Rolex watch without realizing you're doing it, then that's not stealing. If you pretend it's accidental but it's not, then you are guilty of stealing, right? And it has to be unerring. You want to steal Devadatta's alms bowl because he's got a really nice one. And you sneak into their room and it's there. You don't know which is whom. And you go and you grab an alms bowl and you run outside, but you actually grabbed Yagyadatta's alms bowl instead of Devadatta's. Then that's, again, it's not the actual basis. You've mucked up. So there's, some room for, some room for, if you are an incompetent thief, you're much better off. Okay. Merely taking without the intention to make it one's own does not constitute a fault. And taking Yagyadatta's things when one wanted to take Devadatta's merely produces the fault of preparation, not of the actual basis. So when you muck up, then you've got the preparation for it, but not the actual basis, because you've mucked up. Well then, what if one takes what has been offered to a stupa, or an unknown treasury, or the wealth or possessions of a dead monk. So these things we generally call it stealing. So who are you taking it from? From whom is one taking without being given, you ask? So in the first instance, when you take what is offered to a stupa, then you are stealing from the Buddha. The Buddha of that region. There are other positions say that you're stealing from the person who is tending the stupa, but that's presented as an alternate position in the auto commentary. And the second, which is when you are taking an unowned treasure, that would be from the king of a region. An unknown treasure, but this could also be like a mineral resource. The Tibetan word is ter. And if you look up ter in most so if you look up ter in most Tibetan English dictionaries, they're going to translate it as treasure, but it also means like resources. So it means like if you have a copper deposit or an oil deposit, not that that's worth as much these days, or if you have some sort of lithium, that's what people want now. If you have a lithium deposit and you go and take from that lithium deposit on public lands, and who have you stolen from? You've taken it from the government that controls those public lands, right? According to the laws of that place. And in the third, from the Sangha, which are extremely grave faults. So when you take a dead monk's things, if they have already done the appropriate motion, which would then pass the effects over to particular monks, then you're taking it from those other monks. If they have not yet done that motion, then you're taking it from the entire Sangha of that particular monastery. So these are extremely grave faults. Okay, so that is the 3 of taking life. That's the two of taking life and taking that which is not given. And so we will leave the hard ones for tomorrow. So I don't know how far we'll get. There's a lot about both of the next two, sexual misconduct and lying. Anyways, let's now dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings so that they may be swiftly freed of all suffering and achieve the state of Buddhahood. Oh, by this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing and free all wanderers from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Thank you.